What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Football Chatbox. My name is Ryan, and in this video, I'm going to tell you the best double game week players to pick from double game week 20. Having said all of that, let's get straight into the video. Alright, so let's look at the teams that are doubling. We got Manchester City doubling, we got Man United doubling. We also have Spurs and Crystal Palace that also have a double game week in game week 20. But let's kick off stuff by talking first about United, because I do watch them quite a lot, and it's easy for me to recommend from them based compared to some of the other teams. So let's start with Man United. Marcus Rashford is probably the best player that I can recommend in number one spot for United. Since the restart, he's basically returned in every single game. He's on form, playing really well. I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet as well for Man United. So I'm happy to have him as a pick as well as a recommendation. I would highly recommend, even if you don't have him, to get him in for this double game week, because I think he could return and he would be probably my best pick for Man United for double game week 20. In second, I would probably look into a defender. Luke Shaw is probably my recommended option if you don't have a defender. For those of you who have Cancelo and don't have Luke Shaw, if you're trying to think about making the switch, I'm not against it, actually, to be honest. If you don't have Luke Shaw, who would probably be the next best defensive pick? There have been recommendations for Dalot, but to be honest, Diego Dalot has only just returned back from training, so I am not fully convinced on him starting both games. United, as for against City and Spurs, I'm not really sure about that because he is only back in training. We don't know whether Ten Hag will ease him in or not, so that's a bit of a worry and something we kind of have to consider about. Varane, if you wanted, will definitely play both games. Got rested against Bournemouth, so that's nothing too much to be worried about. But the fixtures are City and Crystal Palace. I think he will most likely play both games unless he does get rested for the Palace game ahead of the Arsenal game. That's a possibility as well, but he is probably the next best option. But out of them, I think standard option is Shaw. If you can't get Shaw, to be honest, I won't be too fussed about going for a defensive pick if you can't get Shaw. I mean, you could do a goalkeeper transfer and go for David De Gea. I think he's a solid pick, and could do well compared to some of the other defensive picks as well. For those who want a United defensive pick, I think there's a possibility of a clean sheet in the Palace game, but I don't think there's any possibility of a clean sheet in the game against Manchester City. In terms of a third pick, I would probably look again into the attacking options, and this is where it kind of changes. This is where picking the third option is not really a surefire, so you don't know who actually is the best option from here. I currently have Martial, and I think Martial is probably a pretty solid option. The only problem is he doesn't seem like he's capable of playing 90 minutes, as you can see. Since the restart, Ten Hag is trying to be careful with him because currently he is the only number 9 we have. Obviously, there are rumors of Weghorst signing. Even though Weghorst does sign, I wouldn't be too worried about Martial's minutes for the moment, because I still think he is our main number 9 striker, and he's the one who's capable of linking up the play in the forward line as well. So I wouldn't be too worried about Martial's minutes, because we already know that his minutes are about 65 to 70 minutes for most games anyway. So you'll ideally be hoping for a return from that. If he doesn't get anything, it's a bit unlucky. If you wanted someone else apart from Martial, I would recommend 2 players. Christian Eriksen is doing really well in terms of attacking returns. He's got an assist in the last 3. Actually, if you look at the last 4 game weeks since game week 16, he's actually done not. I mean, apart from the Wolves game, he's returned in the other 2 games. He's a decent player to have at the price point of 6.3 million, or it's Bruno Fernandes. I think Bruno Fernandes might be actually a bit more of a better option, because we could see him take penalties as well. I'm aware that Rashford did take penalties in the Everton game, but we don't know whether that's just for Rashford to keep continuing his scoring form, or, I mean, is he actually going to be the main penalty taker going forward? We're not really sure, but I still think Fernandes is a really good option. But that's for the third pick. I'm not really convinced on who. There is no real solid option, to be honest, for the third pick. The other 2 picks, like in terms of Shaw and Rashford, are probably the most solid options for Manchester United. Now, spoken about United, let's move on to the other half of Manchester City. Now, who is the best pick? Standout option is obviously Erling Haaland, the insane robot machine, whatever you want to call him. The guy just, well, initially I would have said he can't stop scoring, but he has kind of like stopped scoring. But I still do expect him to actually return both against United and against Spurs in the double game week. I think United are more capable of keeping a clean sheet than Spurs, to be honest, at the current moment. But I still think Haaland will score. And for those of us who actually didn't captain Haaland back in game week 9, we kind of know what it feels like to not captain Haaland. So I would be captaining Haaland this game week, but would I triple captain? That's probably a question left to be answered, maybe in the podcast or even in the deadline stream. So make sure to join that to know what my answer is with regards to that. Now, Haaland is probably the best option. Who is the second best? This is where it gets tough because there isn't really a standout second best option. If anything, most of the City assets this season, since the restart, have actually failed to deliver to the hype that we kind of, or to what their standards are capable of. City haven't looked the best as well, to be honest. So Haaland is by far the standout option, but after that, it's like take your pick kind of situation. In terms of a defensive pick, I think you'll need to have one defensive pick at least because I think a lot of people will have defenders from City. Now, whether they'll keep a clean sheet in both games, that's a question. I don't know. I highly doubt that they keep a clean sheet in both games, to be honest. I can see both United and Spurs scoring against them. So if you have someone like a Cancelo already, like myself, do you want to transfer him out, especially for a hit? Is it worth it? That's something you kind of have to question yourself. If you don't see them keeping a clean sheet, what's the ceiling? Probably 4 points. If you're taking a -4 on top of that, then you kind of need a few attacking returns to kind of justify the hit. There is obviously the question of will actually Cancelo be able to play and get 4 points even in the first place by having him? Not really sure. From the last few games, it doesn't seem like he will get those 4 points even. He seems to have fallen out of favor from Pep Guardiola's side, but for me, at the moment, I'm kind of okay with keeping him just because of the fact that I look at the fixtures and I go, I don't see where they're keeping a clean sheet, to be honest, and I'm not really sure. But if you did want a sure defender for whether it is to get rid of Cancelo or whether it's just because you want to see the defender, I would probably look at John Stones as one of my first options. He is pretty nailed for 90 minutes, as you can see, since the last few games. And also, he's capable of getting on the end of set pieces as well. So he does tend to get on the end of set pieces. He does have that history of getting on the end of set pieces as well. The other one I do like a lot is Akanji. Akanji has been pretty nailed for minutes ever since he's joined City. Did get, do I call that a rest-in against Chelsea or did he get benched? I probably think he got rested more than anything against Chelsea. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him come back in the starting lineup. So those are the other two defenders that I do like a lot who should be more safe against Pep Roulette. But the third option, who do we want? Do we want a third option? I think De Bruyne is someone who does have the possibility to haul. As you can see, 9.5 expected points for game week 20 is probably one of the highest as well for game week 20, 9.5 expected points. Apart from him, you have Foden. Some managers do have Foden, although I'm not too convinced by Foden. But someone who's been very interesting and in terms of form has kind of picked up is Riyad Mahrez. Now, Mahrez has picked up form. As you can see, he's got returns in the last 3 games, as well as returned in the cup game as well for Manchester City. He is someone who could probably be another alternative option if you didn't have a De Bruyne. If you had a Salah and you're looking to maybe replace for the City player, Mahrez could be an option. Or if you wanted to replace someone else in your team and you wanted a cheaper midfielder from Man City, I think Mahrez right now is a better option than Phil Foden. So those would be my City picks for that third slot in terms of an attacking pick as well. If you wanted, you could probably go 3 attacking picks, but I don't know if they will actually haul mega like City. I don't see City mega hauling against either one of these teams, so I don't think 3 attacking picks are really necessary. But unless if you're not sure like which attacking pick is going to haul, then you could probably go for both De Bruyne and Mahrez from midfield and Haaland in attack. That's a possibility. A punt move I would recommend is also very punty because we don't know whether he'll start or not. But Julian Alvarez could possibly feature in one of the games or see a decent number of minutes in both games. That's a possibility that should be also considered, I guess. So having said about Manchester City, let's move on to Spurs. Because do you really want 3 players from Spurs? I think not, to be honest. Let's start with Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane probably is the best option to get from Spurs, standout best option. Fixtures, though, are way more harder. They're playing Arsenal and Manchester City. Both teams are in the top 4 for defense and attack. Both Arsenal and City are doing really well and have been playing really well. But Spurs do have a tendency, if I were to show you this, the past history of their fixtures from here onwards, they do have a tendency to actually do well when they're playing at home in a North London derby. As you can see, the last time they lost was in 2015 when they were playing at White Hart Lane or whatever the new state, basically White Hart Lane. So they do have a good record against Arsenal and do tend to score as well, as you can see. So Harry Kane would be the main person I would want. Obviously, you could say the Spurs team is slightly different, not as strong as maybe last year's Spurs team, but they still have a record of doing well against Arsenal when they're playing at home. So I think Harry Kane is a good option. After that, who would you want from Spurs? I think a defensive pick is not out of the question, but I would not recommend, mainly because do you actually see them keeping a clean sheet against Arsenal and City? And after that, they got Fulham. Okay, Fulham's a pretty decent game, but then again, they got City after that. So you should probably ask a question: do you really want a Spurs defensive pick? Do you see them keeping a defensive? Do you see them keeping a clean sheet? If not, you're only probably getting them for the attacking returns, and it's not going to be easy to get an attacking return against Arsenal and City for a defensive player. But if you still wanted one, I think Doherty right now is pretty solid in terms of minutes. He seems to be more of the favorite player right now. Or you could go for Perisic as well, who will have set pieces to his name as well. But I do like the looks of Doherty just because of the price point as well. There's almost $1 million in terms of price difference. So I do like Doherty over Perisic. Now, third player, would I go for a third Spurs player? I probably wouldn't go for a third Spurs player. And I wouldn't recommend a third Spurs players, to be honest. If you really wanted a third Spurs player, I mean, Son is quite expensive, so I wouldn't go there. Højbjerg does have the knack of actually occasionally, once in a blue moon, getting a return. You could go there, but I wouldn't recommend. So I probably maximum 2 players from Spurs, to be honest. Having said that, Crystal Palace up next. Do we want even 1 player from Crystal Palace is the question. We look at their fixtures, it's not the best. They got Chelsea and United in double game week 20. Chelsea, you could say right now, is probably not a bad fixture to have a player against just because of how much of chaos Chelsea are currently in. But even then, if you look at the fixtures after the double, you got Newcastle, United, Brighton, Brentford, Liverpool. That's not a good looking set of fixtures for Chelsea, for Crystal Palace. So you should probably ask yourself, is it even worth spending a transfer on bringing a Crystal Palace player in? Me personally, I wouldn't recommend bringing a Palace player in just because the fixtures after also are not great. So it's probably not worth a transfer, especially given we've got quite a few other doubles coming up. So you might potentially be taking out a player who's going to be doubling in the next coming few weeks. So it's probably not worth a transfer, to be honest. But if you already had one, I know a few people have Zaha. If you had Zaha, might as well just keep Zaha for this game and then get rid of him after that. But in terms of bringing in a player, I would not recommend at all, to be honest. Not even a single player. I probably wouldn't recommend any of them. Their Palace are in disarray. Their form has been out of the window completely, getting annihilated from left, right, and center from various teams. So I would not recommend Palace at this moment. But yeah, that is basically my list of the best double game week players to get from game week 20. If you wanted to know what were my top 3, then you got to check out this YouTube short video as well. And also, if you wanted to know the stats behind all of this and maybe look at even more in depth into this, make sure to join us on the podcast and the deadline stream this coming week as well. So having said all of that, my name is Ryan. Welcome to the Football Chatbox. If you are new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Almost about 50% of you who watch this video aren't subscribed, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. And thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us.